Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope that you're having a good day. Sorry about the daily emails being so messed up and that today's didn't include the link, but I'm glad that some of you found it and happy to be able to learn a Rashi with you today from the second aliyah of this parsha of Kedoshim. We so often have Achrimos and Kedoshim together. It's sort of nice to have them separate and be able to look at them on their own. And as opposed to many of the other parshios we've seen in Vayikra, where it was very hard to find a Rashi. A Kedoshim is not one of those parshios. They have a lot of mitzvos, a lot of interesting Rashis, a lot of things to discuss this week. So we'll go from the very beginning of our aliyah today, the second aliyah in Parshas Kedoshim, which speaks about perversion of justice, or the mitzvah not to pervert justice. And the Torah speaks about this in many different ways in various parshios, but here in specific, lo sasu avel b'mishpat, you shouldn't pervert justice. And then the Torah gives multiple examples of that. On the one hand, lo sisa pnei dal, you shouldn't favor the face or the person of the poor. Velo te'edar pnei gadol, and you shouldn't overly favor the gadol, the one who's great. B'tzedek tishpot amitecha, you should judge every person b'tzedek, with justice. So the question is how to read these few stitches of the pasuk. The opener is clear, lo tasu avam mishpat, that's a clear opening. And actually, Rashi, very interestingly, here connects the word avel with other words in the Torah, which are really, really bad. Sanoi, Meshukat, Cherem, Toeva, through a series of different psukim, just to show you how bad the perversion of justice really is. It's an avel, it's an avla, it's something horrible and terrible. But the Torah gives very specific guidelines here. So what are each of these? Lo sisa pnei dal. Rashi says, Shalo tomar anihu, v'ha'ashir hazeh chayo lefarneso, azakenu. You could easily have a case between a rich person and a poor person, and the judge might favor the poor. What does that mean, to favor the poor? Well, they have rachmanas on them. They say, oh, this poor person, poor in both senses of the word, impoverished person, look at the difficulty of their life. They never get any parnasa. And look at this wealthy person. He has so much money. He could easily help this other person. What am I really going to rule in favor of the rich person, have the poor person lose even more money and feel even more indebted to the rich and feel even more impoverished? No, I have a power and a say over here to sort of make justice in the world, even though it's not the exact correct psak din in this particular case. I'm going to favor the poor person and create justice in the world. My vision of what justice is to balance things out more, have the rich person really owe the money to the poor person in the outcome of this court case, and then the poor person will be a little bit better off. They'll have a little bit of parnasa, they'll have a little bit of ability to support themselves. So that could be an instinct that even a very good, very positive, very moral judge could have, trying to do the right thing, the just thing, the moral thing. But the Torah is warning against that. Of course, one has to judge based on the facts of that particular case, rather than playing favoritism to one party or the other. What's the pull to favoritism towards the gadol? Rashi says, Lo tehedar pnei gadol, shelo tomar, ashir huzeh, ben gedolim huzeh, hech vayshenu v'arenu v'bushaso, onesh yesh bedavar. So you might say to yourself, well, the ruling is really in favor of the poor person or the small person, the insignificant person. But nonetheless, I'm afraid to rule in their favor, because how could I embarrass this important, chashuv, very prominent person? There may be repercussions to it. I may be punished for it. I may be treated badly because of it. My family might be treated badly because of it. You're afraid, in terms of the aura surrounding these great people, you're afraid to bring them down. You're afraid to embarrass them. You're afraid to chip away at their armor, and therefore you might rule in favor of the other party, in favor of them, as opposed to in favor of the other party, just to protect yourself. So there's an instinct here, and these are not the sum total of all the ways that a judge could be pulled to be tisa pnei dal or tedar pnei gadol. These are just examples that Rashi is giving, but giving us an insight into human personality, into the perception of things, into why a judge might be pulled to favor one party or another, rich versus poor, big versus small, etc. So that's how Rashi reads the pasuk and concludes, "B'tzedek tishpot amitecha." Instead of being pulled in this direction or that direction, you should judge the case on its merit, b'tzedek, with justice, what is right and what is correct. As Rashi says here, "B'tzedek tishpot," as opposed to tisa pnei dal, as opposed to te'edar pnei gadol, "B'tzedek tishpot kimashma'o," like its plain meaning. "B'tzedek tishpot amitecha." You should judge your friend, your neighbor, your person, the litigant, bitzedek, with justice, as opposed to perverting justice by favoring one versus the other. That's the reading of the pasuk. But then Rashi adds a davar acher at the end, which is totally not the pshat of the pasuk in any way, shape, or form, but which is important for us as well. Rashi says in the davar acher, the second reading, that maybe bitzedek tishbor amitecha is not the conclusion or the antidote to these perversions of justice, but a separate mandate. The mandate is havidan es chavercha lekaf zuchus. But tzedek tishbor amitecha doesn't mean literally according to the letter of the law, and is not a reference to judges, which this whole passage is really referring to, but rather it's an appendage to this section about judges judging favorably, to actually extrapolate to the rest of us who are not judges, who should also judge justly. But the judgment of justice in a courtroom and the judgment of justice outside the courtroom are remarkably different. In contrast to the courtroom, where one's perception of things and desires cannot play a role, and you have to be following tzedek, what is actually right and correct according to the letter of the law and the particulars of the case, outside the courtroom, tzedek has an entirely different connotation. Tzedek, justice, is not about looking strictly at the letter of the law, but giving people a cushion and giving people the benefit of the doubt and being what we call dan lekaf zuchus. If there's an ambiguity in the case, so your default should be to judge them favorably rather than not favorably. And that is not a perversion of justice outside the courtroom. Outside the courtroom, obviously, if there's a case that's very, very clear, a person did clear wrong. So we don't say, dan lekaf zuchus, oh, you just judge them favorably. No, that would be a perversion of justice even outside the courtroom. But outside the courtroom, when there's a doubt, when there's a suffix, you don't go down to the letter of law and drill down and say, well, I can't find the facts of the case, but yeah, my perception of this person, they're no good, Nick, so forget about them. No, you have to go towards the other extreme, towards saying, well, if I can't ascertain the facts of this case, I don't really know what happened, therefore I'm going to judge favorably. That's going to be my default position. And doing that outside the courtroom is a form of justice in and of itself. I think there's a lot to think about here, especially in terms of the contrast of courtroom and not courtroom, but more importantly, in terms of the definition of what justice is, which sometimes is a little bit ambiguous. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
תודה רבה.
Be well.
חודש טוב.
You too.
Thank
Chodesh
you.
Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well, everybody.
Tov.